So I invite Santanu Bhattacharya to facilitate the panel discussion. Hello.
Okay, thanks, Rohit. Good. So thanks everybody for participating in this. Morning time for us. 6:30 in the morning. Thank you, Rochelle. Thank you, Marcio, as well as thank you, Prashant. I'll start with asking them to introduce themselves a little bit more before we get into the discussion on the topic, which is how Kanban can be a savior for you. So, Marcio, you want to start?
Cool. So, hi everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys. So my name is Marcio, and I'm probably a principal consultant at Elaborate today. So Elaborate is a management consultancy in Australia, and we are helping complex business. We are seeking to change in response to competitive customer market pressure. If you want to know more about us, please access www.elaborate.com.au. So as a principal consultant, I've been leading and executing various initiatives here in Australia with clients of different sizes and industries. So that has been exposing me to a wide range of value streams, operating models, organizational designs, culture, and social dynamics. So I hope I can bring something valuable to you guys today.
Okay, thanks, Marcio. Thanks a lot. Rochelle, you want to go next?
Cool. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you guys are. My name is Rochelle Roos, like previously introduced. I'm from South Africa, working with Agile 42. And Agile 42 is a global company. I'm working for South Africa, but globally we try and understand your organizational culture, decision-making process, and see how we can help you become more of a resilient organization, especially in today's times where there's a lot of uncertainty. So yeah, I'm very honored to be part of the panel today, and it's a very interesting topic, a very loaded topic, I think, especially in today's time. But I'm super excited to be part of it and to see how I can learn from you guys as well. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you. You want to go and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. Yeah, thank you, Anthony. Welcome, Marcio and Rochelle. I'm Prashant Mavinkare, Enterprise Agile Coach with Innovation Roots and community leader with Agile Network India and Kanban India Conference. I've been with Innovation Roots for last 5 years and into IT industry for around 18 plus years. And my Agile journey started around 10 years back, and with I myself being a SPC and AKT Kanban trainer, I could see that Kanban is doing Kanban is being very effective. So this one was a very interesting topic where we thought of sharing in this tough situation we can have an online panel discussion where we can share our thoughts and our learnings. So I'm very happy to be with you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Prashant. So let's get into the topic now. So the topic today is how Kanban can be savior for you. This topic is very interesting to me. As such, Kanban itself is very interesting to me because of I got attracted to Kanban probably 4 or 5 years back got introduced to David Anderson's book on Kanban, his experiments in Microsoft and other kind of companies. The way I attracted to it is very simple. I looked at its principles. It doesn't threaten me. It says that start with what you do now. So it is not asking me to change the way I do tomorrow or next hour. Similarly, if you look at all the 4 principles, it says that respect the current process, roles and responsibilities. Whenever you go for Scrum discussion, people talk about, okay, we don't have managers, we don't have testers, we don't have developers, we are a development team. And the roles of manager is not there. We need to become a coach. So I got attracted to the principle of Kanban where it says that you respect the current process, and roles and responsibilities to start, which was pretty interesting to me and less threatening to me to get into the journey of the Agile world. So with that quick thought about my interest about Kanban, I'll ask the panelists the first question. Maybe I'll go start with Rochelle or Marcio, anybody can pick up. How can you introduce Kanban to someone who doesn't know about it at all?
Okay, so how would I introduce Kanban to someone that does not know Kanban at all? So it will probably be best for me to start with describing that Kanban is not just about a board or a ticket, or because I think that's kind of is derived from the literal name of Kanban. But the Kanban method consists out of 6 practices and 2 sets of principles, and it kind of embodies looking at the system, the human system, as well as the system of work, and then combining those two. And it's kind of looking at agility of an organization, not just by creating more agile teams, but rather having those agile interactions. And that's really what Kanban for me focuses on. It's in enforcing those interactions with one another so that you can get a evolutionary approach to agility rather than a revolutionary approach. That's in a nutshell. Depending on how much time I have to explain Kanban to a person that has never heard of it before, I'll probably go into a little bit more detail. But overall, the essence of that is for me the interactions, getting agile interactions. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Rochelle. So Marcio, why don't you give your take on how you introduce Kanban to somebody?
Well, when I'm introducing Kanban, I like to introduce it as a management strategy. A management strategy that leverages the service orientation paradigm. So something that sees things as services. So if you start looking things as services, if there is a service, there must be a customer, right? So I think Kanban is a management strategy that focuses on customers, on satisfying customer needs. A strategy that put focus on understanding who the customer is, what is the customer purpose, like how the customer demand manifests itself, what are the service level expectations for our customers, how can we cope with that service level expectation, right? So Kanban is a management strategy that focuses on delivering services that are fit for our customer purpose. And the way we do that is through like simple practices, kind of visualization, limiting or controlling work in progress, trying to manage flow, making like policies explicit and so on. And the thing that I like about Kanban is that, as Rochelle said, like this is not like a revolutionary approach. It's something that you can start today, tomorrow. You start with what you do now, right? You don't need to trade off your process today to start using Kanban. A big transformation, you don't need a big transformation, a big reorg, a new operating model to start working with Kanban. So yeah, I think that's how I like to introduce, like leveling up a little bit to more like seeing that as a operations strategy.
Great, thanks, Marcio. Prashant, you want to share your thoughts?
Yeah. So when it comes to introducing Kanban, I try to categorize people into some three buckets, in fact. Like any one thing who are completely niche, who really wants facing some challenge and looking out for some solution. There are people who know Kanban as a board, okay, and there are people who are eagerly looking ahead to who knows about a little bit about Kanban, and they want to learn more about it. The second part, like people knowing as a board, are the maximum percentage in the industry. Okay. So in fact, to introduce Kanban, Mike Burrows Michael Burrows has given a very good strategy of static systems thinking approach to introducing Kanban, which can be used for the second and third category people. And once where we can just find out what is their actually, what is they're looking for, what is the source of this, when by understanding their source of dissatisfaction, uh, how to understanding and analyzing their demand and capacity. So static is a very good approach where we can introduce Kanban, and this in can be started by assessing the people's knowledge, where as a in the from the Kanban University can be started with from the for every level of people. It can be, it need not have to be only a management level, leadership level. From the, it can start from team level till the upstream decision makers. It can be implement. It can be used in every context and in every domain. In fact, that is the width of approach it is having.
Really?
So from Kanban University to start with, we can begin as a beginner. A person at the very niche level can start with a can start with a simple training called Team Kanban Practitioner, because that gives a very good start for the people who don't know anything. Because most of the category people who knows Kanban just as a board, that person actually can understand far more important information about Kanban. So I feel static would be the very good way to start introducing the Kanban to anybody who is new to the Kanban.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks a lot. That's interesting how you guys would introduce Kanban to people who hasn't heard about it. So I'll go to the next question. Actually, you see that we have 6 practices in Kanban where you say visualize your workflow, your work, limit your work in progress, limit managing workflow, explicit policies. So you guys are you all are implementing Kanban or helping organizations and teams to implement Kanban, as well as training them. As per you, how do you feel that which of these core practice is the hardest for the team or organization to adapt whenever you work with them? I want to hear some experience from you on how you see the teams are adapting and which core practice you find hard for the team to adapt. I don't want to all 6. I want you to pick up one and talk about it. I'm sure you may have seen multiple core practices is hard to implement when you do that. So for the sake of time, I'll ask you only to focus on one, what you felt is hard for the team. So Marcio, why don't you start with you?
Cool. So one of the practices that I see teams struggling a lot is manage flow. I'll dare to say that like over 90% of the teams worldwide are oblivious to the concept of flow, to be honest. And everyone today is concentrating on resource efficiency. They are trying to maximize the utilization of their resources, of their people. But what the organizations still haven't figured out is that in knowledge work, the type of efficiency that matters the most is flow efficiency. In other words, how efficient, what is the efficiency in which your work flows through the value stream in order to satisfy your customer need. So like when we see delivery performance, like I think the industry standard today that teams use for measuring and communicating delivery performance today is all about the team velocity. What's the velocity? How many story points can you deliver and something? And to be honest, like your customer, they couldn't care less what is your team velocity. You know what I mean? So your customer don't speak story points. Like the only thing, the concept they have is the concept of elapsed times. They don't even talk about working days, right? So if today is the 1st of April, and then they ask you how long it would take.
Okay, go ahead.
So you say and you say like 20 days, so your customer thinks like, oh, 20th of April, you know what I mean? Like they think about elapsed times, and there's a lot of reasons why story points is not a good like not a good measure, not a good communication strategy. It doesn't work well for forecasting, doesn't work well as a costing mechanism. Like, and usually teams, they are using story points to try to estimate in a deterministic way something that's full of uncertainty and full of variability. So when you're estimating, when you try to forecast something, we should always use a range of dates and always try to bring a probability level associated with that range. So instead of looking delivery performance from an internal perspective, looking your story points, my advice would be try to look delivery performance from your customer perspective. Pivots the focus, right? So try to think, what is your customer lead time? What is the predictability of that lead time? What is your quality? What is the predictability of your quality? So try to look performance not from an internal point of view, try to look performance from an external point of view. And then if you could measure just one thing, I would say try to measure your finish date. Because if you have finish date, then you can understand your throughput rate, you can understand your delivery rate, you can forecast. If you can measure two things, try to measure your finish date and your start date, because then you start having a notion of work in progress and a notion of lead time as well. And as soon as you become good in measuring start and finish date, then you can start playing with more sophisticated metrics that will work as a debugging mechanism, as a diagnostic tool to help you understand what's happening in your system and help you improve performance, predictability, and flow.
Great. Can I continue on that? Marcia, what you mentioned there is a lot of things, and I also can't necessarily emphasize the importance of it even more. So I think asking what practices people struggle with, or what practices people might have a little bit more resistance to is difficult, because each organization, each team is so unique, and that's kind of difficult because depending on what the environment looks like, what they are trying to solve, their customers, they might be at different stages as well, and they might have different resistance points. One that I would like to maybe talk about is making policies explicit, and that can kind of, why people can resist it can be also for multiple reasons. It can be because they've actually never had the opportunity to really think about what are the policies in their organization. And if I talk about policies, maybe some that might be a little bit more familiar with people that that doesn't know Kanban that well, but your definition of done or your definition of ready is quite a common one within the Agile community. But policies within your workflow, how work flows through your system, speaks to your commitment points as well, making that explicit, your pull criteria as well. So what defines a work item to move from one state to another to fulfill that customer need that Marcio spoke about, and which is quite heavily founded in the service delivery principle as well. So those policies can be resisted because it can also be because there might be fear within the organization to talk about certain things, or certain things that they might feel that's not necessarily in their control, or what's the value of speaking about it or making it visible. And then how I address a situation like that is I usually talk about a story, and that's kind of I got that from one of my mentors, and it is about a family that was celebrating Thanksgiving. And I'm not sure from where you guys all are, but for the purpose of this story, Thanksgiving was celebrated by making a turkey. So the little girl is watching her mom in the kitchen, preparing all the things that needs to be prepared for the Thanksgiving meal, and she sees that her mom cuts the front and the back off the turkey before she puts it in the oven. And the little girl asks the mom, why do you cut the front and the back off the turkey before we put it in the oven? And the mom replies, you know what? It's because my mother did it. And the little girl goes on, she's like, okay, that's weird. And she goes to her grandmother and she's asked, Granny, why do you cut the front and the back off the turkey before you put it in the oven? And the granny replies, you know what, little girl, it's because my mother did it. And you guys can kind of, figure out where I'm going with this. So thankfully the great granny was still alive, and the little girl went to the great granny and she says, Granny, why do you cut the front and the back off the turkey before you put it in the oven? And the granny replies, you know what? It's when your great grandfather bought our first oven, it was way too small to fit the full turkey. So that's kind of a story that I lean into when talking about and introducing policies. And with that, I follow a quote from James Baldwin, which he says, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can change until it's faced. And that is so powerful. With Kanban, it helps us to make things explicit so that we can start questioning it, so that we can really start reflecting on, is this really helping us in focusing and understanding our customers' needs and expectation? Is this helping us to let people self-organize around the work? And are we focusing on the right stuff? Because this also then kind of keeps us honest on not trying to optimize the local optimization, because local optimization almost always leads to global sub-optimization. So yeah, so that's kind of one that I've seen, one practice that I've seen is difficult or people struggle with, but to be honest, that can be said for all 6 practices, because it depends on the people that you're working with, the teams, the organization, because we're human beings, right? So with any new change, we've got a little bit the resistance in us. We've got a little bit more to lose than to gain. So yeah, but I think that's also where the Kanban method comes into play, and it speaks to, if you're receiving resistance, then we should rather avoid meeting it, head on, and kind of use the water analogy from Bruce Lee. So we need to kind of flow around the resistance, flow around the rock, so that we don't create more resistance, and that we can actually create an evolutionary improvement. So yeah.
Well, that's an interesting. There are things I heard from people that when you write a clear, explicit policies between moving things on the board from one place to another, are you not being very prescriptive, or not making it flexible for people to discuss and decide, instead of having a detailed, explicit policy and kind of making it very fixed? So how do you respond to that?
So I would respond with, even if we don't make it explicit, there are policies that is governing and that's creating certain behavior within the organization. And the mere fact that we're not making it explicit means that we're taking control away from the individuals to start questioning it, to start introspecting on their behavior and asking, is this really how we should act, and is this serving? And then kind of, it takes the opportunity away from looking at our principles within Kanban, which is focusing on the customers, allowing acts of leaderships on all levels, all of those things. So my question would be, if we don't, what is the effects thereof? So
yeah, it saves a lot of time for people to know how to decide on certain things, instead of every time getting to an individual decision, or wasting time on discussion on specific thing which can be clearly laid out as explicit policy. That's
Yes.
a great point.
So,
Good.
sorry, I just want to add on to it again.
Sure.
This also means that if we're making policies explicit, we're also taking it into account that we can reflect on it, right? So, and I mean, that's a very loaded statement, because in certain organizations, you might not be able to change anything, but we won't know if we can change it until it's faced. That's James Baldwin's quote towards that. So yeah, it's a tricky one, but I think even within the visualization, which is the first practice within Kanban, we're visualizing not the how we would like to work or what policies we would like to have. We're visualizing the ones that we know we currently have, so that if that is causing frustration or some form of inefficiencies within our human system as well as our system of work, we can hopefully start questioning it and evolve. So
yeah, just to build on top of
that's why it is one of the practice hard to implement, as you rightly picked up the right one, because it has a lot of question doubts among the team, and it's important for everybody to have a clarity on it. This powerful practice of Kanban. Thank you very much, Rochelle. I'll move to Prashant. Prashant, what is your experience of one practice which you found hard for the team to adapt? Managed flow and explicit policy is already taken, so you to pick up something else.
Sorry. So before I talk about the one of the interesting practice which I would like to share, I would like to add a couple of points to what Rochelle has added about explicit policy. In fact, as she said, it's really a human part of it, that when you make explicit policies explicit, that will help really to align the whole system or people in the system on one, and bring them on one page. So that will really help to the policies to be evolved also. So that would be really one of the major benefits of making the policies explicit. So everyone are aligned and everyone is on the same page. So they can stop on the same. The governing is more easier if you make explicit. That is what one point I wanted to add it to it. And adding to that, the practice which I wanted to speak was one of the very important practices, limiting width. With limiting width, it will actually take your the Kanban as a board to Kanban as a system. Okay, it's one of the very important parts, which will make the Kanban as a board to the Kanban as a system. Don Renston actually very clearly, very interestingly mentions, it is easier to start work than it is to finish it. It is easier to grow work in progress than it is to reduce it. Okay, so this particular concept of work in progress, it helps you to collaborate, you focus and build a flow. In fact, it will help you to balance demand versus capability. The challenge with the major challenge which we meet every time, as soon as we see some numbers, okay, we directly jump into the things saying that how we are going to decide that. That's a very human part of it. How we are going to decide this with what is the number, what is the calculation. Before that, in fact, it's very important to understand why is that parameter, what is that width limit all about. Okay, so that width limit, in fact, helps us to trigger a signal. That is the actual Kanban. Okay, so if a column has a limit fixed, okay, that is going to help a person if there is a capacity there for that particular work to be done. So that if that work is done and if that there is a vacancy created, there is a signal sent from left to right, okay, and the items will start moving towards the right, and that will actually help you to build the flow, in fact, optimize the flow. So in fact, many times what will happen is, the thing is, people are very much inclined towards when they want to optimize flow, they immediately think about optimizing the cycle time. Okay, but they never think about how we are going to optimize the work in progress. Okay, because there is the queuing concept which come into picture. So it is very interesting to do it, to begin with, to start with the trial and error method. They can have a number and they can start, instead of concentrating on and trying to optimize the cycle time, if they try to optimize the queue length, then I think, and that is help, that can be done help through adding whip limit. So this is one of the very interesting practice which will help uh, the team to understand exactly what is Kanban as a Kanban system, and that's very important to implementing Kanban as a method. So it's a very interesting to implement. When we are implementing, it throws a lot of challenges. At the same time, it adds a lot of benefits. So this is one of the practices which is very interesting to implement when we introduce Kanban to the system.
Yeah, no, I see that whenever I have seen implementation of Kanban, it is one of the hardest of practice to adapt, because you are asking people not to work on something which they are comfortable with if there is a queue already filled for the next place. So they get out of their comfort zone and go and help others to clear the blockage, and really need to work as a team to create the flow, so that you respect work in progress limit. The team becomes more collaborative, and they slowly can get into a flow if you respect work in progress limit. Otherwise, you can always continue to pile up your inventory. And as we know, theory of constraint, inventory is not an asset, it's a liability. So that's the problem happens. Thanks, Prashant, for that.
Yeah,
So
to add to this, another point. Actually, this will help us to build what exactly it is called Kanban system as a full system. Full system. So without whip limits, that full signal is lost.
Thank you. So I'll move on to the next. That's an interesting observation we had. So this I'll ask, start with Rochelle. So Rochelle, I hear about Kanban maturity model from Kanban University. And I want you to, you can take a little bit time here to explain how it is useful. Also, the moment you say maturity model, immediately we think of CMM, capability maturity model. And that's a lot of old school people talk about, right? Though it has, I'm not saying it is not valuable. I don't want to create a debate here whether CMM is valuable or not. But the moment you talk about maturity model, it reminds me of that. Can you take a little bit time, explain that, and then probably I'll have Marcio and Prashant also comment on it. But what is Kanban maturity model and how it is useful?
So if I need to describe the KMM model, so Kanban maturity model, I would firstly start with it's probably not the same maturity model as what we're used to. This is more of a, and I'm going to jump onto the metaphor that David Anderson uses, which is that of a sports coach. So a sports coach uses some form of playbook to guide and to help his athletes to introduce or to stretch them just far enough so that they can increase their fitness without them, overreaching, or without them, staying at one specific fitness stage or hurting themselves going forward. So the KMM needs to be seen as that for KCPs or Kanban professionals, using this as a sports guide or sports playbook to help shift organization, to help introduce just enough stress within the organization to help them evolve. So with that in mind, I'm going to first maybe I'm going to park that. I'm going to first try and speak about Virginia Satir's change model. So I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with it, but she kind of represents how we as human beings process change, or what's the human side of change. And it looks like, and I'm going to now use the visual signals. It looks like so you'll have some form of late status quo, and then you'll have a foreign element. So let's use COVID-19 as an example, right? So we globally, we were going on in our own. We had some form of status quo. Things were happening as is. COVID-19 got introduced, and because of that foreign element, it created stress within the system. That stress caused this status quo to dip into chaos. So that's because it's causing resistance within the status, right? So that chaos or that dip that happens, then can continue, and then hopefully the thinking behind it is that some form of transforming idea will happen, and you'll kind of get lifted out of that dip and hopefully land into a new status quo. So a different reality, a different new. Now, so that is how we, as humans, that's how we kind of the human side of change. So KMM is built onto that to say that we know, and I mean, what we've spoken about previously as well, it is a start with what you do now. We don't want to create more resistance within the system. So KMM focuses on the two common transformation failure modes or risk. One is overreaching, so that means we're going too fast too soon. So that is that traditional change management of we're at A, we need to be at B, and these are the steps that we need to take, right? So that's the overreaching risk. And then the second part is the false summit plateau. So that's where we find ourselves of, I've introduced Kanban, we've got our board, we're sorted, we don't have to do anything else, right? So that is not pushing ourselves, not allowing ourselves to improve. So KMM is kind of focused on and quite aware of those two failure points. So, and then taking the Virginia Satir's change or J curve into consideration. So what I would have liked to share with you guys as well is the KMM model, but I'm sure if you guys Google, or I'm sure we'll be able to create a link after, or share this material with you guys, with the participants after the session. But it's threefold. It focuses on culture, practices, and outcomes. And the KMM maturity levels from 0 to 6 is not practice based. It's not, okay, if we do X, Y, and Z practice, we will be in level 1 or level 2. It is outcome based. The transitioning practices provoke those change, or provokes the change that we want to see. So if we're saying it's outcome based, the level 1 or the level 0 that we're talking about is usually the one an organizational team that is that's oblivious. So they're not necessarily aware of what's going on. They're not necessarily customer focused, not necessarily even focused with or understanding what's happening within their organization in itself. Then you get your level 1, which is quite team focused. So this is very much individually, the individuals within the organization or within the team. And this is usually the resistance that you'll get with, for instance, what Prashant talk about with the WIP limits. You'll start seeing an organization that maybe has a per person WIP limit there, because they're quite team focused and individually focused. Then your level 2, which is your customer driven, those outcomes that you're going to see there is a little bit different, because now we're starting to involve our customers' viewpoints as well. So now you're evolving, and the outcomes that you're going to get is a little bit more of what Marcia was speaking about on the flow side, right? Taking your customers' need into account as well. And then you've got your level 3, which is your fit for purpose, 4, which is your risk hedged, and 5, market leaders, and finally 6 is your built to survival. So I wouldn't even, and I think for they would probably the Kanban University would probably say the same. 5 and 6 is, or even 4 and 6 is not necessarily where we need to focus, and you can't necessarily jump as well. You can't start from a level 0 where the culture or the outcomes, the values that you have within your organization isn't steered to the same outcomes that you will get from a level 6, for instance. You can't just snap it and then you'll get it. You need to change that human system, and that takes a very long time, right? And that also is very unique. So not each organization will move through it at the same pace.
I really appreciate you taking some time and explain all the different levels and how it is different from CMM. Anybody else, Marcio or Prashant, quickly, any comments?
Well, I think if you abstract, like, and in understand, like, if you are to make intervention in a system of value creation, there are 2 different types of change we can do. One is design changes that it's about new organization design, new roles, new operating model, new ways of working, etc. There's the second one, that's evolutionary change. And to understand the Kanban maturity model, you need to understand what's the formula for evolutionary change. So you start with what you do now, you introduce some stressors in that system, you reinforce the feedback loops in the system to capture the signals, and then you encourage acts of leadership in that system. So what the Kanban maturity model does is to help you identify those stressors. So you don't stress the system too much and then create resistance, as Rochelle said, or you don't stress the system too little so that you don't have enough energy to create change, to break the entropy. So I think like, just to finish, I think like a lot of people think that the Kanban maturity model was David and Theodora, like one day in Bilbao having pictures, and they start designing what would be the practices and the feedback loops, etc. That's not what happened. What happened is that they look back like 10 years of global experience to understand, to decode, to reverse engineer the things that were working and the things that were not at each stage of maturity where you were, so that you could understand what are the exactly stressors that I should introduce given where I am now. So I think that's the difference of the Kanban maturity model, I guess.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Marcio.
That's very,
quickly.
Yeah.
A sentence.
Yeah. One sentence is that actually, one of the very important observation, actually very well explained by Rochelle and Marcio, very, very important points. But one of the important observation, what is going to, whenever people see the Kanban maturity model or something, they have some, they immediately jump back to saying that it is something like a prescriptive model. Okay, but for them, the important point is it is not a prescriptive model. In fact, it will help you to assess themselves, and it will help people to build a roadmap. In fact, okay, that can help you as a very good roadmap, but not, they should not take it as a prescriptive model. That is one important point I would like to highlight.
Okay, thank you very much. So now let's come about, we talked about Kanban, we talked about practices, we talked about the Kanban maturity model. Let's come and focus on the challenges the typical team faces, and how Kanban help in addressing those challenges. Now, this is important to me because we can talk about all the practices, what should be done, what is good to do, all the experimental and theoretical aspect of it. But when it hits the trench, actually the road, what are the typical challenges the team face, and how you see Kanban can help in addressing them effectively? I think this is the last question I'll be asking you before we start taking the question from the audience or participants. There are a lot of questions queued up already. So I'll just expect you to talk about a typical challenge your team faced and or in your organization, or when you implemented as a coach or consultant, and how Kanban helped alleviating that challenge. And I'll request you to keep it short so that we can give enough time. We are already 1 hour done for the participants to ask the question and get some answers of them. Thank you. So who will start with? We start with Marcio.
Cool. So one common challenge that I see teams struggling with is with sense of purpose, and then they see that they see themselves as their purpose as a group of people that execute tasks, and then Kanban help them to pivot that to having their purpose at satisfying customer needs, for instance. Another thing that I see is teams struggling with lack of visibility of work in progress, class of service, risks, blockers, dependencies, policies, and Kanban helps with a strong visual management. Teams struggling with overburdening, and then Kanban helps with setting up WIP limits, controlling WIP within the system. I see teams struggling with self-actualization. You know that dopamine kick when you deliver something meaningful, and then you get that sense of actualization. Kanban help that with the mantra of stop starting, start finishing, really concentrating on delivering things, satisfying customer needs, etc. I could keep going. I'll let Rochelle and Prashant share some thoughts as well.
Yeah, if I can jump in, and I swear I'll keep it short. Like Marcio mentioned there, overburdening is also one big thing. Visualization, I see Kanban not just assist with visualization within the team, because that's not necessarily with how organized, and that's how I see it most of the times going into clients, how they've organized their teams isn't necessarily for full value delivery. So you get the work that happens within the team, and if you create just visualization within the team, it's just a subset of that customer value. And Kanban helps create that visualization of the full value delivery or full service delivery, which means that and that includes upstream and downstream delivery. So that creates visibility around where does work get stuck, and where do we need to asking the right questions, and it allows for that deferred commitment, and for that what we call and also what one of my mentors said was the bicycle moment, allowing the team to defer commitment and only take on work once they've kind of given their customer the opportunity to tell me what you want, what you really want. So that once we work on it, because the cost of that or the cost of not completing it is then very high, or discard rate is higher downstream than upstream. So that visibility is quite awesome.
Thanks, Rochelle. Prashant, you want to have a quick word about it?
That was a good. Yeah, that was a very good conversion. The important thing is when I look at Kanban as a method, and if I don't want to compare as such, because every framework or every practice has its own advantages. But there, if you see that all the frameworks, they tell what is expected, but they don't say that how it can be done. So there is, in fact, we expect team to be collaborating, we expect team to be transparent, we expect team to have focus, but that how it can happen. And they will say that we should not multitask, we should all these things. With the help of Kanban, it actually evolves, in fact, because once the things are visible and in front of the team, by themselves comes ahead and take the responsibility, and that helps them to collaborate. In fact, that's much better. In fact, and slowly, the actual values what we are expecting, all those things starts that automatically comes. It's in fact it's not like that. That's another way I would like that this particular thing. It pulls everything. Okay, it pulls the right values to come out of. But instead of pushing the people that, yeah, go ahead, collaborate, this thing, instead of we telling people, people themselves start taking responsibility if Kanban has been implemented, Kanban has been introduced in the right manner.
Thanks, Prashant. One interesting question which is related to implementation. I try to pick up the questions related to implementation first, so that the participants have some takeaway when we finish this. One of the questions which caught my attention is what factors can be used to decide WIP limit? Means the question is how you decide the WIP limit when you design your board, and after that, what are the factors you consider for deciding WIP limit? Anybody can pick up.
Yeah, I can share on that. I think one of the things that have more leverage on stabilizing flow, increasing predictability and flow, is to match your arrival rate to your departure rate. So your departure rate is how much work you are completing, your throughput, right? So, and then your arrival rate is how much work is coming into your system, crossing your commitment points, how much work you're committing. So if the rate in which the work arrives and the work leaves the part of your system are roughly the same, you could say that your system is in a state of flow, right? So one thing, you don't have much control of your departure rate. So your departure rate is like, you have all your dependencies, your delays, and all those type of things. So this is something that you don't have much control today, your departure rate. But you do have control on your arrival rate, which is how much work you commit to. So when thinking about like how can I define my WIP limits, I would say have a look what's your departure rate, what's your throughput rate, and then use that to define your WIP limit on your entry point. So if you are delivering like 5 features per unit of time, could be per month, for instance, maybe your WIP limit would be around 5. Try to match your arrival rate to your departure rate, and then start from there, and then try to see if you need to make any adjustments in between commitment and delivery points. But that's probably like a very good starting point.
I would just like to add on to that. I think we need to also ask ourselves or look at if you need to limit to work in your work items where you want to see or achieve benefits, right? So you shouldn't be surprised when you don't see improvement to time to market if you don't limit your time to market elements, right? So exactly like Marcia also said, we need to look at the system as a whole and kind of create a balanced system. So we're not saying, and I think that's why people resist WIP limits, we're not saying it needs to be 1 or the system can only carry 1. We're just saying that we need to start keeping in mind that there's a cost associated to if we're working on too many things, because then we're not creating focus, we're not reducing cycle time or time to market, and we're not reducing switching overhead, and in essence, we're not reducing the cost of delay. So.
Yeah, and to add to that, in fact, the thing is, another one point that we can see that if there is no, we can see there is a lot of bottlenecks. We can see that bottleneck happening in the system. So that is where I think we have to rethink it. I would like to I share one of the examples quickly. In one of my experience, one of the team was supposed to deliver, their delivery time was slashed by half the time. Okay, they were supposed to deliver it in somewhat around 6 to 8 months, which was still, they were pushed to they were to deliver in around 3 months, and what they did is they added, they were around 10 to 15 people, where they added around 10 people there, and everyone, they were struggling that day and night they were working. In fact, they said that they have already, they are using Kanban, they said. And when I saw that, when I went and saw that Kanban board, we could see that actually they had piled up so many work with that on the board, that every one person was carrying at least 8 to 10 user stories. So there I could make it out. In fact, everyone, when I asked, if there was no dependency between the team members, and they were actually not, there was no required of collaborating. Only the thing is, it was displaying that so many things are work in progress. So there was so much work in progress that everyone was overburdened, in fact. And then when we introduced slowly we started, when we introduced WIP, then they started actually and when they restructured their Kanban system, then they started in fact collaborating with each other, and they started, instead of pulling one user story every person, they started collaborating.
Is breaking a lot.
So that is one of the parameters. Yeah. That is, in fact, that helped them to collaborate with, and that helped them to build a flow in fact. That one of the important parameters. They can see that there's a bottleneck happening.
Okay, thanks, Prashant. So next question I find interesting, that I'll pass it to Rochelle first. The question is resistance from middle management and senior management, right? Whenever the team goes to the management, senior management say that, we'll do Scrum. It is much more easier sell because every 2 weeks they get to see the software. They can understand how people are working and what is the velocity, get some predictability. Much easier to sell Scrum. So, but if I go to the senior management and management say that, hey, I want to use Kanban for our development, there is some resistance. How you as an Agile coach suggest people to talk about Kanban within the company, within the team, as well as to their management to get the buy-in?
Sure. Yeah, that is a difficult, it's a good question. So, firstly, I think there is a massive gap within the education and the knowledge about what Kanban and the Kanban method is. And I think there's nothing wrong with management feeling comfortable with Scrum. That's fine, right? That's kind of meeting them where they're at. But you need to, and I wouldn't necessarily say that we need to sell Kanban or we need to sell Scrum. We need to sell outcomes that's not necessarily profound in or structured within a framework or a set of events and stuff like that. So I would rather, how I would go and understand their needs is, I would honestly sit with them and say, okay, cool, what are your current sources of frustration? Let's first understand the problems that you guys are trying to solve before we start selling something, because we need to start meeting them on their higher up rather than the practices and the principle side. If you look at the spine model, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the spine model, we need to go to the values, right, to the very top. So what are the current frustrations? What are the current dissatisfactions that's happening within the organization that they're trying to solve for? And through that, I would then say, okay, great. So then kind of, tying to the Kanban change management principles, we would go into gain agreement to pursue improvement through evolutionary change. And then I would do it small steps at a time to say, okay, cool, if this is their frustrations, then let's try and map out their current workflow. And maybe you can, Prashant mentioned this earlier, maybe you can use static to do that, right? So a quick static session for middle management or whoever you're trying to get into, to first understand what they're currently dealing with, because too often they think they know and they're like, yeah, no, we just want to go agile because we want to go faster, right? Or we want to be quicker to market, or whatever those ideas are, and then they jump into something that's not really going to solve the real thing. So yeah, so I would start with making sure that you breathe life and visibility into their current needs so that they fully understand that, and then start small, right? So that you can embark on this journey. But yeah, it's a difficult question. Anyone else would like to jump on that?
Yeah, I think you touched really well. Like, we don't need trade like either Scrum or Kanban, right? Like if where they are today, Scrum is what is working well, that's fine. And then what we could just ask is like, what about we improve visualization a little bit more? So it can't hurt. Like middle management would love it. What about we refine like the understanding of in progress? And what does in progress means? And then we make like the policy explicit. And then maybe we break down in progress into 3-4 stages, so to make it more explicit, so they can understand where the work's actually at. Or if we give them visibility of like where are the key sources of delay in the system, and how can we improve flow, reduce like time where the work waits in queues, so in active time, I think they would love it. So like there's no conversation as like a Scrum versus Kanban. And then the beauty of Kanban is that you can Kanbanize any process you have. Whatever you are doing, like it can't hurt to improve visualization. It can't hurt to make things a bit more explicit, like review some assumptions. It can't hurt to start measuring and get like a notion of how long things takes, how much work in progress we have at any point in time. Those things can't hurt. And I think all middle management, they would appreciate it. I think the resistance comes when who is trying to introduce Kanban in a revolutionary way. Like, oh, now we are pivoting to Kanban. Now we are transforming to Kanban. That's where the resistance comes, and we should avoid that.
Agreed.
To add to that, in fact, you can see that, yeah. So in fact, you can one side they say that there is a resistance, but at the other side you can see that irrespective of framework or practice, you can hear the word Kanban is there. At maybe at a whatever level it can be. Like Scrum, they use at the daily stand-up as a display board. You go to the safe framework, there is a Kanban in here used. So irrespective of everything, the Kanban is used. Okay, but at the same time, instead of selling Kanban as Marcio said, let's go and transform. I think it can start very small at an individual level also, because it's very cheap to introduce, like with a tape and sticky notes. At a personal level, at an individual level, they can start and make it effective, which can be made visible, and that can be one of the buy-in for the whole management also. Once people start working effectively with their individual codes, individual Kanban implementation.
Yeah.
That will be my short answer in addition to it.
Thanks, Prashant. I can tell you my experience. I could not hold myself to add $0.01 here. I did not even go to the senior management or management when I implemented in my team. I just talked to my team, created a visualized board, and then started working on it. And then I called the manager one day, my manager, to come and see the board. And whenever he was asking me any question on the project, I showed him on the board that he can know himself. He doesn't need to ask me. And he was so excited about it. And then the director actually implemented in a couple of other projects also, because he doesn't need to ask anybody. He can go to the board and see how things are going himself. And that's how it got propagated to the company, instead of trying to convince, as Marcio said, that, okay, we'll do Kanban from next week, Monday. Instead of taking that approach, I just implemented a board for my team. And after a week or so, went to my manager and asked him to come and see the board. And he was so happy about it, that he could see anything, everything. He has all the questions on the board itself, instead of bothering anybody for a status report or asking anything. So typically from that point of time, we used to send a picture of the board to him. End of the day, no more detailed report of emailing how we are doing day to day or week by week. So that's how I believe I worked, where I did not need to go to anybody for permission, because I can always put a board in my team area and start using it, and then bring people to show what value it brings That's the approach I took. You can try for you as well, instead of already thinking what are the, senior management will tell you. Just do it, and then show the value to the management, and they will love it. That's what I can tell you. That was my experience.
Very efficient.
Shantanu, I just want to add on to that. So I agree, right? So there's no one-size-fits-all approach of starting on your Kanban journey. I would say starting on your Kanban journey. You kind of need to meet them where they're at. But I want to emphasize that the Kanban method is a management method. So that can be a selling point to start as high as possible, right? Because the higher, and I'm saying this higher in the in inverted commas, in a hierarchical part in your organization, you will be able to have a fuller view of the value delivery or the service delivery, and you can directly improve that service delivery, or you can be able to catalyze those improvements and to create, evolve that business to be fit for purpose. But can start at any level. It can start with anything, like Marcio mentioned. We can Kanbanize your process. So whatever you're currently using, continue using it, and just Kanbanizing it with different Agile interactions, with those Agile interactions of the practices and principles of Kanban in mind.
Yep, perfect. So I'll take one more question. We have some more time. A lot of people are asking that you have tools, you have Jira and other tools, but still, do you recommend a physical board? If you recommend it, why? And there is a rider question on top of it. If your team size is very big and they're working from several different locations, how you manage with the physical board? These are typical scale question plus a tool versus physical board question. It's a two-part. So Rochelle, you want to start?
Sure. So firstly, if you've got a distributed team, I wouldn't understand why you would want to do physical, because the admin overhead for that is going to maybe outweigh. So the coordination transactional cost of just maintaining a physical board might outweigh the value that you'll get, and it won't necessarily be real time, right? So how would you coordinate that? So it's not about the I know there is some arguments around the physical and digital tools that you can use. It's more about the dedication of the team as well. So if they fully understand what the Kanban board is about, it's not about just visualizing what I'm doing. It is visualizing the flow of customer value, right? And how we're working to get that done. Then they might use it more, and they might gain more benefit from it. But digital tools, especially in light of what's happening right now, I mean, globally, most people are working remotely. There's a lot of nice tools. There's Kanbanize, which I know we in our organization in Agile 42 we also use. I know Jira is also seen out there. It really depends on once again, what problem are you trying to solve? But I would rather say, from my opinion, I've used both Jira and Kanbanize. Kanbanize has more structure around the metrics that you can get from and the data-driven decisions you can make. And then comparing again physical or digital, I mean, if you guys can see at the back here, I've got a physical board, and this is not just for me, this is for my household, because I like to move things around, and I get a hit of dopamine every time I move a sticky. So that's one point to take into consideration. But you can still get that, and you can still get collaboration within your digital tools. You just need to make sure that you pay more attention, and you're more deliberate about that. So how do you get collaboration and around the digital tools, which you would have gotten naturally with physical tool? That's up to the team and them to kind of self-organize around that.
Yeah, to complement that, I think every time there is a dichotomy, there is still something to be understood. Every time we get in a situation where we need to trade off something, like either physical or digital. It's kind of like black and white, 1 or 0. You know what I mean? There's something to be understood in that place. So like they will be serving different purpose. Like as Rochelle said, like the physical board brings that emotional connection, the physical connection to the work. You can visualize all the work in a glance. You can touch the work. You can move the work around. People, they are just like walking by, they can just see things. So there's a lot of benefits in having a physical board when that fits your context. But also there's a lot of benefits in having digital tools. And then here you benefit more like with distributed teams, with like capturing and processing metrics and things. So sometimes your unique context will fit better a physical tool, sometimes will fit better a digital tool. But I invite you to think of both instead of or try to use an and, because you might collect both benefits from physical and digital, and then you might discover that the cost of transaction to keep both tools is so irrelevant, close to the value that it brings to your system. So yeah, try to think about that.
My 2 cents for this particular question is yes, there are unavoidable conditions where we have to go for a digital as well as, but the thing is, uh, we should also keep that, as Rochelle said, the purpose in mind. Okay, or else it is very easy to get derailed, in fact, because instead of actual purpose of using Kanban, we our purpose is deviated to, and we get ourselves aligned to the digital. With whatever drawback there, the good thing is that they are the digital tools are also evolving very fast, but still we get aligned to those digital tools, in fact, instead of our actual purpose why we want to use Kanban. Okay, and we start restricting ourselves. And actual main purpose of uh, in, Kanban is used as an information radiator. It becomes information refrigerator. So I feel, yeah, the first preference should start with the physical board, and that then you can slowly, based on the requirement, you can shift it to the tool, any tool, whichever suits
That's
your
right.
context.
That's right. Thanks. I think we are almost hitting the time. So I have my last question. I'll start with Marcio. How do you think Kanban can help in the current situation of the world, Marcio? We are all too much distributed now. People are complaining about between teams of 2 countries. Now every individual is distributed. The physical board cannot be seen. So how do you think Kanban can help into the current situation of the world?
Yeah, again, I'll try to level up a little bit instead of talking about boards now. I think like Kanban helps with creating a culture of self-orientation and customer centricity. And I think now more than ever, you need to stay tuned to your customer purpose. Like the game has changed, new context, new purpose. So like there's a new context now. And then if there's a new context, your customer might have a new purpose. If they have a new purpose, they might have new selection criteria. And if they have new selection criteria, they will probably have like a new vendor selection or new customer product or service selection. So if you want to stay relevant for your customer, you need to stay tuned to your customer purpose. So I think this is one way. Another way is increasing responsiveness of your team, of your value stream, of your product. Now more than ever, you need to be able to respond to changes in market conditions, right? So things like deferring commitment to the less responsible moments, being able to replenish in smaller bets and more often. So Kanban can help you like with practices of like controlling WIP, managing flow, and then especially by doing those things, enabling small and frequent changes. And if you are able to do small and frequent changes, then you enable your business to start build, measure, learn cycles. So you can build, measure, learn, and then you get something in front of your customer, you measure, you try to capture like feedbacks, and then you learn from your customer, and you pivot, you get something like at the hand of your customers again. So responsiveness will be another thing that Kanban can help a lot. I think the other thing is eliminating all sorts of waste. I think now is more than ever, you need to eliminate all sorts of waste, and then Kanban will help you to reduce discard rate. You know, like those things that you start, you put a lot of effort on those things, but they like sometimes they no longer make sense to finish, and all effort you put into that thing goes to waste. And identifying, reducing cost of transaction, cost of holding, cost of delay, like increasing your quality. So all your capacity that today is going towards failure demand, is start going towards value demand. And then you stop like wasting capacity to satisfy secondary needs, and then you focus on primary needs. So yeah, eliminating waste, increasing predictability, and then also focus on culture more than ever. Everyone is distributed, and then how you create a culture where you can like help people to increase focus, alignment, value delivery, remove overburdening. So I think there's a lot of ways that Kanban can help at that stage of where we are today.
Thanks, Marcio. Rochelle, few words.
Sure. Yeah, I would like to say I agree with Marcio. There's so many elements at play right now. There's you need to kind of focus on the service delivery principle of making sure you zone into your customer's need, because like Marcio mentioned, that might be different and that might have changed because our environment has changed, right? So the foreign elements or the stressor has been introduced. And then on the second hand is also focusing on the change management, so the human side, the humane side. So there's a big culture shift because people's safety and security within their environment has been threatened as well. So we need to take that into account to make sure that the human system is looked after and also has a space to voice their concerns. Because if you do that, then you'll if you look after your human system, then a lot will happen. But I think also to kind of summarize what Marcio said, with all of those elements into play, we need to, I'm going to end with, I love quotes, so I'm going to quote with Russell L. Ackoff's statement of the performance of the whole is never the sum of its parts taken separately, but it's the product of their interactions. We need to really zone into those interactions more than ever before, and try and see how best can we smooth that for this whole ecosystem in your organization, rather than local optimization.
Very rightly said, Roshan. To add to that, in fact, from my side is that
Sure.
yes,
Rochelle,
this is where, yeah. So I'm adding to what Rochelle has said. Actually, very rightly concluded that where people have already adopted Kanban as a method, we are already starting to adopt it. I think they are having. Personally, I feel is that they have some upper hand because they have already started. They must have already looked into the getting the values in the right place, like collaboration, respect for the people, responsibility, engagement. And now, in this present situation of complex, it is not only complex; it's a chaos now. In this situation, how leadership at every level of the organization has to evolve. Already, those things are already that will all come into play now at this particular situation. So I think Kanban is going to make Kanban as a method is going to make an impact in this. I'm very much very positive impact in this particular situation.
Okay. Thank you, guys. I think we have crossed 5 more minutes. Thanks for joining this. Again, thanks, Marcio, Rochelle, for early morning. discussion. And Prashant, thank you very much as always.